No, I'm glad you enjoyed it. That's exactly the type of feedback I like to hear.
Yeah. So I want to admit everyone into the room. So I do a very quick introduction.
Yep, go for it. Go for it.
That's fine. All right, great. So let me admit everyone. Doing that right now. So I've started recording, so we'll be live in a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Still waiting for others to join in. So we have a lot of people entering to the room right now. Hi, everyone. Good to see you. It's really, really good to be here. Thank you so much for being part of this. Just want to say you're welcome, and we'll start shortly. So as you can see, our guest is here. He's prepared, he's waiting for everyone. So I can't wait. Hi, Harry. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
No, thank you for
Hello,
having me.
Rachel. Rachel says good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. Yeah, happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
You know, how are we dealing with the lockdown and everything? So please, just some few announcements before we begin. Please, as much as possible, try to mute your mics so that we don't have a lot of distractions, so that we can have a seamless webinar. All right. Then also, please feel free to use the chat function at any time. I believe Harry is here for us, so he'll be able to answer whatever questions you have. And so without that, Harry, I don't know if this is a good place to start.
Sure, yeah, no. So thanks so much for having me. It's great to kind of have everyone here. For those of you who don't know, I'm based in the UK. My name is Harry. I'm a future trainee solicitor at Baker Makenzie, which is a law firm over in London. And I'm currently studying at law school. It's called the LPC, and about to finish that towards the end of this month. So I'm looking to start practicing in September, and went through the application process to get that training contract, which is sort of like an internship or a job, a year or two ago. And for about the last 12 months or so, I've been interviewing recruiters, I've been speaking to other students, I've been creating resources, guides, podcasts, and so on, all designed to try and help kind of aspiring lawyers learn a little bit more about law and kind of how to break into the profession. So yeah, that was kind of, I guess, the basis of how Rosemond and I got in touch to organize this. And yeah, really kind of happy to try and help answer any of your guys' questions, and to yeah, hopefully help you learn a little bit more about law and kind of what it is I do, and anything else you might want to ask me on the content side of things as well.
Okay, that's quite amazing. So there's a tradition we usually do. So when we have very good guests, or we have guests coming up, we love to read your profile. So we just love to do that because I think your profile itself is an inspiration to basically allow a lot of people basically see the trajectory of your growth and how you've been able to actually use where you are to get to where you want to be. So Harry Clark is a young yet astute and innovative law graduate and future trainee of Baker Makenzie, who has garnered a vast array of working experience from high street law practice, pro bono work, even gaining several international scholarships at multinational corporate firms like DLA Piper, QLaw, amongst others. With a passion for improving access to the legal profession and helping aspiring lawyers learn about law in global context, he founded the More From Law podcast series, which covers latest developments in the legal industry with a variety of interviews, deep dive analysis, commentary, and discussion to broaden the listener's legal horizon. All right, and this is not just cool. Harry Clark has published several enlightening resources for aspiring and even practicing lawyers. Some of these publications and podcasts are on topics such as commercial awareness, how to nail your digital first impression on LinkedIn, how to get better at negotiating, mental health, inspiring change in the legal profession, application and preparation tips for landing internship training contracts, among several other publications. He's easily accessible on his handle at Harry Clark Law, Twitter, Instagram, and also his website is harryclarklaw.com. So Harry, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for being part of this, and I am so excited to learn so many things that you have to share, because a brief background now. First of all, I want to say thank you everyone joining me from different parts of the world. So I know that we have Nigerians on the call, which is my home country. Hi people. We have people from different countries, India, Australia, Germany. I can see someone from Berlin. I can see someone from so many countries. So I really, really acknowledge the time, and I'm pretty sure that we're in different time zones. So you actually being here means a lot to us, means a lot to me. So thank you so much. And we really, really hope, I am actually sure that you're going to have an amazing time, all right? So Harry, how does it feel to be on the other side? Because on your podcast and, when you're giving content, most times you are on the asking side, not actually on the receiving side. So how does it actually feel to be on the other side and you're the one that is now being asked questions and you have to answer? Just a brief answer.
Yeah, it's good fun. So I kind of was fortunate enough to kind of be on a number of podcasts and webinars, answering questions and kind of being on part of panels and even attending them, like you guys are today. And it was kind of through doing that the idea of actually hosting something and kind of being able to ask questions, give it your own kind of creative directional input was really interesting. So it's been really good fun. I think over the last month or so, the show has had a really big kind of uptick in people listening, which is great. But no, it's been really good fun. The good thing about podcasts and webinars and live streams and all that stuff is you can really add your own kind of take on it, and make it really personal and make it niche about whatever it is that you're interested in. So if you're looking to learn more about anything, I think podcasts are a really great way to do that because they can be so sort of specific on a certain area or whatever. But no, it's been really good fun. I've enjoyed it.
All right, that's amazing. So let's just have a little bit background. So how has your trajectory been from getting into law, choosing to actually go on with a law degree, and actually coming to this point where you are so certain of what exactly you wanted to do, which made you to actually launch your podcast, generate a lot of value and actually give that kind of value. So what was your journey like, and what was the turning point for you that made you certain that you were actually on the right path?
Yeah, so that's a kind of really common interview question that I think you'll get as a candidate, that kind of why law, why commercial law, whatever. And I guess for me, when I was probably about 16 or so, when I was at secondary school, I was studying a lot of kind of essay style subjects, so English, history, politics. A lot of the kind of argumentative writing style and things really kind of appealed to me. And when I was 16, I emailed sort of local firms around me. I went on Google Maps and kind of asked family members if they knew anyone, and kind of looked up local firms around me and emailed them basically saying, is there anyone I can speak to? Could I just kind of shadow you for a week and just kind of see what you do on a day-to-day basis? And through doing that, I was really fortunate to get sort of two opportunities. So I spent a week at a family law practice on my local high street. That was really, really interesting. That was the first time I actually saw what lawyers did, in practice, or at least a sort of certain type of lawyer. And whilst, all of the kind of client-facing stuff, the kind of problem-solving skills you're doing, all of the reading and the kind of critical thinking you're doing was really interesting. To me, the kind of the area of family law and kind of wills and probate was very emotionally intensive, as you can probably imagine. And so when I went into the second week, which was to do with more kind of commercial corporate stuff, I had more of an interest in just the business world anyway. And I think it was when the turning point, I guess, for me, like you said, was I was kind of working with this solicitor, and we were working on a contract that was in two languages. It was part Russian, it was part English, and it was to do with a delivery of printers from Eastern Asia to the UK or something like that. And we were being tasked with trying to kind of solve this dispute between these two companies that were based all over the world. And I think it was just the idea that, you could be sat at a desk in a small town in one country, and, that this legal problem spans all over the globe, and is kind of really interesting me. So I think that was the first time I kind of thought I really like this idea of business law. And also I really like that international kind of aspect to it as well.
Yeah.
And then I think after that, I kind of realized I wanted to do that kind of commercial law in the international sphere. So whilst I was at university studying law, like you said, I kind of went down at that route. I started to research more about firms that had either multiple offices around the world, or they worked with clients who were from all over the world, so that I could hopefully do that when I worked there. And then I did sort of 3 rounds of applications over the course of 2 years. And in my third and final round, I was successful in getting a sort of internship with Baker Makenzie, who are an international firm. And then since then, like you said, the idea of making things and giving back value and so on, it was a total accident, actually. So I was on my phone, and I was looking for some space to clear on my phone because it was quite full, and I was trying to download something else. And I saw LinkedIn, and I hadn't used LinkedIn for the best part of 2 years. And even when I say used it, it was more of just a digital CV. You know, I just kind of kept updating my experience and what I was doing now and then, but I never really kind of actually used it as a platform. And it was at a time of year when a lot of people were posting about, oh, I've managed to secure this job, I just secured this application, I just secured this interview, and I just kind of remembered that, you know, not too long ago I was in the position where I didn't have any of that, and I know how easy it is as a candidate who's applying to look at the state of social media and what everyone posts and kind of view that as a true and fair representation as to what people are doing and how they're getting on. So I made a little post about that. It resonated with people, and then from there, just kind of not having a concrete solid plan, ended up kind of making my own blog. And then when that kind of got some traction, ended up making my own podcast. And it's just been really, really fun. I'm coming up to about a year of doing that now. That's kind of my journey in 60 seconds or so.
Oh, that's really great. So what I can actually see was that, well, you didn't have it all figured out at the beginning.
No.
But you just took it one step at the other. You started with, okay, what do I have around me? Went to the, a firm close to where you were, tried to look at what you wanted. And then, of course, you were exposed to something that you actually love to do. And then that actually gave you exposure, and then you were able to do other things. That's really, really amazing. And what I can actually get from what you said is basically start from where you are. And so if you're trying to understand, clarity is actually a journey. So before you decide that this is what I want, you need to actually give yourself the time to be exposed to all sorts of things so that you will know what works for you and what doesn't. Thank you very much for that answer. So I will just go straight to the questions. And please, everyone, if you have a question, feel free to just use the chat function. We'll definitely address them. All right. So my first question to you is, okay, so coming from where you're coming from, what would be your advice to legal professionals that are seeking to actually expand their scope of practice, particularly internationally or on a global scale? So what would be your advice to legal professionals that are trying to do that?
Yeah, so I think it's really important, like you say, to kind of have a kind of global context to your understanding of law and everything that's going on, especially if you're practicing in the world of business. So many companies nowadays are not just practicing in one country, they're practicing in several, and even if you don't practice with those kind of companies now, it's very likely that in future you might be able to. So certainly I think it's important to kind of keep up to date with world events, because something that happens on the other side of the world can quite easily impact something that's coming on your country. I think coronavirus was probably a good example of that, of everything that's kind of going on. So in terms of the best ways for doing that, so I think when you first get started trying to follow the news, trying to learn more about law or whatever profession you're in, it's very kind of easy to focus in on, and this is something I used to do as well, it's very easy to kind of focus in on things that you're already somewhat familiar with. So I was already quite familiar with a little bit about the world of business. I quite liked certain industries like technology. And so whenever I was trying to learn more about the law, I'd kind of sort of forced myself unconsciously to focus on those areas. And it was only when I started to try to kind of network a bit more publicly and write more publicly, I realized, this small percentage of law that I thought was, significant is actually just a drop in the ocean compared to the amount of stuff that's out there. So I think certainly trying to network and try to speak to other professionals is really important. And that doesn't necessarily mean in person. I think if LinkedIn was where it was now, when I got started back when I was, 16, 6 years ago, I really would have leveraged that. And, the great thing about LinkedIn is it's a platform designed and built for business professionals and working professionals, and you can meet people from all over the world from your bedroom. So when I first got started with writing my blog, I don't think I left the house for a professional reason to go network until at least I'd been doing it for 3 months, and I was still able to speak to people from Canada, America, in Europe, just by trying to be proactive and put myself out there. So that's certainly one thing I do, is network and try to meet with other people. And then the second would be try to learn more about other industries and other countries, other jurisdictions, which might not be identical to the one you're currently practicing, but certainly supplement it in some way. So if you think about law, for example, it's very easy to just speak to lawyers and speak to law firms, but there's an element of salesmanship in law. You have to keep your clients happy. You have to always try to market your services. You have to advertise what you're doing. So, learn a bit about the world of marketing, or, think about the world of finance, think about how these firms, generate business and make money and make profit. If you do that, you'll go from just being that kind of what's called a sort of backroom lawyer, someone who's really good at the kind of letter of the law knowledge and just focused on the books, to more of a kind of front of house lawyer, someone who is, able to go to events and speak publicly and, hopefully try to win business from clients, as well as having that kind of letter of the law knowledge that you might have if you've studied it elsewhere.
That's amazing. All right, that's great, because some of the things you've been able to say, I can attach to the fact that law in itself is a business. So apart from just trying to learn things on the back end, first of all, understand that there is a global context to what you're doing. So follow the news, leverage social media platforms, be proactive, put yourself out there. In the jurisdiction I find myself, which is Nigeria, we have rules that basically, try to limit the way we advertise. So we may not be able to advertise like Coca-Cola or Pepsi, but by giving value, by basically, offering very, very qualitative services, there is no way your name is going to be actually spread and people can actually come to know exactly what you're doing. So don't say that, oh, my knowledge of the law is enough. You must understand that law in itself is a business. And so you must actually position yourself properly to actually gain and attract opportunities. So the truth is, if you hadn't put yourself out there, there is no way I would have come across your work. I would have been so impressed and would not have been having this conversation. Imagine if I was a client looking for somebody to advise me on commercial awareness, what would happen? I would be the first person I would come to. So that's very, very profound. And I really think it's something that we should actually pay attention to, and just not limiting yourself to your jurisdiction, wherever it is. So thank you for that answer.
No, right.
So for a lawyer that is really seeking to join, the big firms, DLA Pipers, Kill Law, Baker Makenzie from different jurisdictions, what are some of the key things that actually have to be in place so that you can be ready to take advantage of those opportunities whenever they show themselves? What should I do? Let's say I'm from Nigeria now. If I want to be partake in such firms and such organizational practices, what exactly are the things I should begin to put in place, to get ready for those opportunities?
Sure, yeah. So I think there's a number of kind of misconceptions and mistakes that people tend to have about this. So, for starters, legal experience is obviously great, but it's not necessarily a prerequisite, or you must have it in order to practice. There are people in my cohort, or people I know, who are currently practicing law who didn't have any kind of legal experience before they entered profession, and instead, and this is what I kind of recommend candidates do regardless of what type of experience they have, I think, is try to evidence the type of skills and the type of mindset that the firm will be looking for. So you mentioned one of them, commercial awareness, is obviously a really key skill, basically keeping up to date with the world and being able to put a client's needs in context. Others include like business development, the ability to go out and win new clients, critical thinking, being able to kind of evaluate the way that you currently do things and criticize and try to improve the kind of methods that you use to do things. Those are all a few examples of the different types of skills that that lawyers will inevitably need at some point in their career. And so I think from the experience and the skill side of things, those are kind of good ways to do it. Try to think about what the firm is kind of looking for and demonstrate, not just what your responsibilities were when you were working in a certain role, but where possible, where you kind of went above and beyond that, and you kind of demonstrated your own real kind of personal impact. And then I guess a second side to things is the idea of sort of your motivations. So you asked me at the beginning about why law, and I think hopefully in my answer you can kind of tell what I did was to sort of start with that really big broad question of why law, and then kind of take the recruiter through that journey, that timeline of how my things developed over time. And eventually what you'll notice is that question sort of begins to narrow over time, until you hopefully reach that specific firm that you're applying to. So, start with that really broad question of why law, go on to another section of it, why commercial law, for instance, reflect on how, even things that aren't related to commercial law, like family law practice, what didn't I like about those different areas? How did that then lead me on to my next step to then apply for this or learn more about this? And then eventually what you'll hopefully do is the more you kind of go through that process, you'll eventually reach or help the recruiter reach the conclusion of you applying to that firm. So that's kind of like the funneling process as well. And then finally, I think it's one of the key things that I did. So I did 3 rounds of applications. So I applied 3 separate times for different firms. And certainly between my second and my third round, my academics and my skills and my experience didn't change that much. But what did change was my kind of approach to applications. So I spent a lot of time researching the firm, trying to learn more about what are their unique selling points, what are their cultures like, what kind of clients do they work with, and not just so that I would then just kind of reuse that information on application. You know, it's no good just telling a firm something they already know about themselves, but instead saying, okay, I see that you've done this, and that really relates to me because of X, and I can evidence that because of this experience I've done, and so on. So you're kind of using the information about the firm, but then relating it to your own experiences when you're trying to kind of describe it to the firm. And I think just as a kind of general last point on applications, it's also really, really important to tailor them. So in my first round of applications, I kind of had this idea to write out a template, you would call it, a sort of stock answer, and sort of copy and paste it and not really change much of the words here or there, only really changing the names of the firm. And it's no surprise that every single one of them got rejected, because when you're applying to these firms, you need to make sure that your writing style is really specific. You need to kind of show that you've done your research. You know, a good test is that you shouldn't be able to change the name of the firm in your application and it still makes sense. You should kind of have enough specificity to do that. And I think if your application can pass that test, and you can go back and look at your old ones and reflect on them and try to review where they went wrong, that's hopefully going to kind of help your applications improve and like you say, land some kind of opportunity down the line.
Okay, that's great. So you mentioned, okay, you have to study the firm. Okay, so we have somebody who actually made a comment, and it was in relation to your last answer, which I just want to stay. But so far, so good. Basically, you've mentioned very, very key and important things that we actually have to take into mind, like studying the firm, critical thinking, no copy and paste approach, because each firm is different. Different firms operate differently. And then, of course, being able to know your own story, own your own reason why you are basically doing what it is you're doing, why that firm, why do you want to engage with that firm. So I'm going to read a couple of comments, and I think this will help us. Okay, so from Johnny, Johnny says, hi Harry, you've mentioned the importance of taking the recruiter through a story, starting with why law and later why commercial law. I often feel that I do not have a compelling turning point. How should I go about this process of crafting this narrative? Do you have any tips for how I could really introspectively reflect on my own journey to help me create such a story? So thank you, Johnny. That was a very, very good question.
Yeah, no, good question. So obviously you'd only say why commercial law if you're interested in that, but I'll assume for the sake of your question that you are. So, I don't think it's necessary that you kind of have this big eureka moment where everything fits into place. I think it's quite rare for anyone to kind of have that when they're thinking about a career. But hopefully if you kind of, take a copy of your resume or your CV or whatever it is, and you've got those list of experiences, a good exercise would be to kind of take 2 different colored pens and next to each one, write down all the different things that you really liked about that experience when you did it. Ignoring kind of what you later did down the line at that moment in time. What did you really like when you did that? And then with another pen, say, that's what I didn't like. And hopefully for each of those experiences, you'll have at least a mix of 2, which then means, when you're talking about experiences which don't necessarily sound as though they relate a lot to law. So for example, I was working in retail in a shop, for example, just the idea of kind of helping people and customer service and being able to, I don't know, someone comes in and they're buying something for dinner and trying to help them pick out a wine, or just trying to kind of go a bit more. I really kind of found satisfaction in that person coming back the next week and saying, oh, that was really nice, and I did this or whatever. So that idea of kind of customer service, and I guess what you would call client satisfaction, does slot alongside the law. And that's an example of kind of reflecting on an experience that doesn't necessarily relate to commercial law, in a way which will kind of help you build that story. And then I guess when it comes to kind of the idea of crafting this narrative, like you say. I mean, yeah, don't write about something that's not true. I mean, make sure you are genuinely interested. But I guess in terms of putting those pieces together, you know, you should hopefully pick out the sort of a number of those key experiences, key because they kind of had the most significant kind of change in your perspective on what law was about. So kind of doing that pen exercise. It could be that, you know, once you tried one thing, you decided that it definitely wasn't for you and you've never done anything in that realm since, and you can kind of reflect on that fact and hopefully change it that way. You could look through your experiences, think about the ones which the recruiters might find the most interesting or the most impressive, and kind of use those to both tell about your story and also evidence your skill set. And then, yeah, like we kind of said, you kind of start with that broader question and then just begin to narrow. So you go, so for, in my example, why law, why commercial law with an international element, and then even narrower, why commercial law with an international element that also had the opportunity for me to work abroad when I worked there. And the more you do that, the more you will kind of narrow down the kind of list of firms that you think will suit you and that you would apply for. I hope that answers your question.
Yes. All right, great. That's amazing. I can relate what you've said, particularly to when maybe you are applying for maybe your master's or a PhD, and then you are told to actually write a purpose statement. Now, what is the school looking for? They're basically looking for your story. You having to own the reason why you want to commit to studying this particular course. And it's something that you should actually ask yourself. Now, most firms maybe here may not say, okay, if they say, tell me a little bit of yourself, of course, you will not begin to say things that you cannot relate specifically to the goal you are trying to achieve in trying to, you know, get, you know, an intern or maybe get a job in that firm. So like you said, you should basically own your story and narrow it down. You know, you should be able to break your story to something that a 6-year-old will understand, because simplicity is very, very key. You can be simple, you can be direct, and you can be on point. Basically, you'll get heard better or you'll be understood better. So that actually works. Okay. So I'm just going to take one more question. So we have somebody, and I believe this question will be quite key. So I'm trying to read it. So it says, good morning, sir. So great to have you this morning. I'm sure he's great to be here too. I'm a final year student of law looking to graduate very soon. My question is, how does taking virtual internships help my chances in getting other international opportunities, like international clerkships, vacation schemes, and tips on how to create a good presence on LinkedIn? So this question is from Babatunde Shobayo.
Oh, great. And nice to meet you as well. Good to have you here this morning. So I think that question's in two parts. So for the first part, on the kind of virtual internship side of things. So I actually didn't discover virtual internships until after I'd kind of secured my my training contract, but they're certainly a really, really invaluable way to learn about what lawyers do and get an insight into that type of firm. So, you know, they're freely available. You can sign up. You don't even have to do law firm virtual internships. You can do them at marketing, accountancy firms, consulting firms, and so on. But personally, I think what they really kind of serve as is a really good kind of first base for you to learn more about what lawyers do. So, you know, go into one of these virtual internships with an open mind. Have a go at kind of some of the tasks that trainees do, for example, or that kind of firms offer for their junior level staff, and use that as a kind of on the basis to say, okay, I liked doing this little bit, but I didn't quite doing this bit for whatever reason. You know, learn a little bit more about practice areas, all the different ways that this big umbrella term of commercial law is kind of broken up into intellectual property, into disputes, litigation, banking, finance. You know, there's so many different areas of law within the commercial side of things. So I think the virtual internships are a really good way for you to gather a bit more information and to learn about it. And also they're just a good show of enthusiasm. I think if you apply to a firm and say that you've done a virtual internship there, it shows that you're really interested in that firm. And I think that, again, it comes down to how you kind of use that to demonstrate your motivations and demonstrate your skills that you're trying to prove to the firm. So they're certainly really useful and a really good starting point. So I don't think you really have anything to lose by doing them. I think they're a great resource to hopefully learn a little bit more. And then in terms of LinkedIn, I think, so I think, you have to get the basics right first. So get a good photo, use your cover photo, make it sound a bit bright, go through your entire profile. LinkedIn will help you do this. I think it's on the add profile section, whatever, on your actual profile. Yes. It kind of goes through each stage of your profile for you and helps you to make sure everything's filled out. So definitely do that. And then when it comes to actually, talking about your experiences, for example, in the kind of job section, I think it goes back to that point that we mentioned earlier on, which is, give a short introduction as to what your role was, but then also critically demonstrate how you went above and beyond it where possible and kind of what your personal impact was. So, what changed from day one to the day that you left as a result of you being there? If you were working in a shop, did you have customers tell you that you were, able to help them with certain things certain ways? Did you win employee of the month, if that exists? Did you help kind of improve sales in some way? Were you responsible for managing something? I think those are kind of good ideas as to how to kind of leverage your experiences. And then I guess the next important thing is the about section. So again, going back to the idea of kind of telling your story like we did earlier, that kind of about section in your bio is kind of a sort of chance for you to spend 60 seconds kind of giving an elevator pitch as to who you are, what you've done, what you can do, and what you're looking for, and give a little bit of personality when you're doing it. So certainly when it comes to kind of the basics of your LinkedIn profile, I think that's how you kind of go about setting it up. And then in terms of driving engagement and trying to hopefully build more connections and networks and things, I think it comes down to two things. So the first is, you don't necessarily have to actually produce content and write posts and whatever, but certainly engage with it. So, like other people's statuses, comment your thoughts on things, ask them questions, engage with what they're doing and join the discussion. That's a really good way to get your profile out there a little bit. And then secondly, when it comes to trying to actually connect with people, send personalized connection requests. Don't just kind of send off 100. If you really want to connect with that person, and you really want to get something out of it, give a short intro. Say, hi, my name is this. I'm looking to learn a bit more about that. I saw that you've been doing this recently. Would it be possible to connect and ask you something, or would it be possible to connect and meet for coffee or whatever? I think, don't expect the best results if you just send blank connection requests. You can get them, and they're certainly useful if you're just kind of somewhat interested. But if you're looking to really kind of make a genuine connection with someone, tailor your request because it will stand out. I hope that's kind of a good 30 seconds on LinkedIn as well.
All right. Okay, that's great. Okay, so for this question also, I also have something to say. So I realized that InsideSherpa.com is an amazing platform where you have a lot of law firms that basically communicate together to begin to, provide virtual internship services. So from different platforms, from law to different areas, I currently engaged in the virtual program by Latham and Watkins. So I was involved in a couple of merger and acquisition transactions, proofreading smart contracts. So I literally gained knowledge in things that ordinarily I would not have been able to if I didn't have these platforms available. And how did I get to know about them? LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, beyond just being a place where you swipe and like and comment, you should actually keep your eye for what exactly you're looking for. Because when I see someone post like, oh, I just recently completed this virtual stuff, and I don't just like and go, I try to engage with the content, see how the person went about it, maybe even sending a personal message. And like you said in your profile, you don't bite. So the worst you will get is no response or a no. So, nobody is actually going to give you any trouble. So it's one of the things that I actually found very, very beneficial. And I cannot even begin to imagine the experiences and the opportunities that have come as a result of engaging in doing such a virtual internship, even during this lockdown period. So really, really amazing. And for LinkedIn as well, you've mentioned engaging. So I know how I met you, I was actually encouraged by the last statement, I did not bite. So I said, yes, I know he would respond. And I'm so glad he did. And so it's one of the ways to actually, meet people, which is really, really quite amazing. So thank you very much for that answer. And so please, guys, please keep your questions coming. I'm very, very sure we'll be able to attend to everything. But because of time, we may not be able to do that. Now to my favorite question. So now, you talk about commercial awareness. I've read your book, your ebook on commercial awareness, and I think it was one of the most detailed and most explanatory things, I saw in relating to how to actually think as a lawyer. There's so many things you mentioned. And for those of you who are attending this webinar, after this, I will definitely send you a copy. I believe it's free, so it's something I can send them.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, all right. So you spoke about the different, that what commercial awareness is, what it's not, internal commercial awareness, that is you in relation to your firm, and external commercial awareness. And you have so many podcasts, so many publications on it. So for the benefit of those that may not have an understanding of what it is or how important it is, what exactly is commercial awareness, and how important is it for lawyers who wish to be relevant, in global scheme of things?
So it's, especially if you're going to practice in the business world, it might be less so if you're a human rights lawyer, for example, or family lawyer, but certainly in the business world, commercial awareness is really important. I think a lot of people struggle to define it because you can read a lot about it and everyone kind of has different definitions. I think the absolute simplest way I can think about it is basically a client comes to you with a problem and you are putting that client into context. So you're thinking about what industry is that client based in, what's their time or budget for this particular problem, why are they looking to do this legal transaction, be it are they looking to open a new business, they're looking to buy another, what's the underlying reasons behind that. That all comes under this idea of context, and that context is really, really important because it can change the way that you give your legal advice. So one of the kind of things I try to kind of write about is this idea of there being a kind of two-stage process whenever you give legal advice. So, client comes to you with a problem, you go away, you do your research, and you look at the law, and it turns out that you've got three options, X, Y, and Z, and these are this is what's legally possible for your client in this scenario. However, if you take that client into context, like I said, you consider their industry, you consider their time, you consider their budget, you kind of add that level of commerciality. It might be that option 2 is actually better than option 3 because there's the element of time and they need this done quickly, or option 1 is actually the best bet because based on their previous track records of deals and transactions, they don't want to make this mistake again, for example. So it's sort of the role of the lawyer not to find a perfect solution to a problem, because there rarely is one, but instead to go away, do their research, and then present their findings to the client and say, look, these are all the different options. This one is probably best if you want to do something that's very low risk. This one is probably best if you want something done really quickly and cheaply. This one's best if you want to make sure, all your bases are covered. It'll be more expensive. You're sort of giving the client all these different options and weighing up the pros and cons to both, and then allowing the client to then make the decision as to how they want to proceed. So lawyers are not just people who regurgitate, statute and just constantly just repeat the law and what the law says, but instead they're kind of that advisor who helps the client go through their problem and hopefully help them reach a good conclusion. So that's kind of what commercial awareness is to me and why it's so important, because I think if you don't have it and you kind of give your advice without that context or without that awareness of what's going on around you, in the business world at least, it's very likely your advice could be outdated, it could be wrong, it could be totally ignoring the fact that the client doesn't have a lot of money or has done something very similar previously. So I think that's kind of what it is and why it's important, really.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to be quoting a statement by Jeremy Grunfield, who you referred to in the
that's a good one.
Commercial Awareness. Yes, where he worked as a lawyer before joining the Australian startup Inside Sherpa. So he says something that no one tells you at law school. Clients don't really care about legal information. They really don't. They don't want the lawyer to just tell them legal information. If they did, they would easily look it up on Google themselves. What clients want is a trusted advisor. They don't want you to rattle off pieces of legislation and names of cases. They want commercial, concise advice. Okay, so basically, you need to, as a lawyer, step into their world, understand the business that they do, and don't just think from an adversarial point of view and say, okay, this is what the law says. So you need to understand how the law basically relates to them, and you can be able to, give the advice that they actually require. Okay, so I'm going to ask like a second question out of this, internal commercial awareness and external commercial awareness. So what is internal commercial awareness? What is external commercial awareness? So what we just discussed, is it internal or external? And is there a difference between both, if any?
Yeah, so I decided to break it down into two areas, because I think that there's one which is kind of more heavily understood and kind of emphasized whenever people discuss it. So firstly, there's this idea of external commercial awareness, like you say, and for the most part, that involves understanding the business world and understanding what's going on in the news, keeping up to date with commercial stories, for example, everything that's kind of going on outside the firm and that you can hopefully relate it to your practice in that way, which is what we discussed. And then there's also this idea of internal commercial awareness, which goes back to the kind of the thoughts about critical thinking and business development, like we've mentioned earlier. So how does the firm you're working for work as a business? How do they make money? How do they generate profit? And how do you, as a junior lawyer, play your role in doing that? So a piece of work comes on your desk and it's your job to review that contract and make sure there's no mistakes. That contract then gets passed up to someone who's more senior than you, and is able to, review something else about it or improve it on it in some way and pass it on to the client. So if you think about it, law firms are just this big machine. And I guess that's okay. That's fine. Law firms, just this kind of big machine made up of lots of different pieces. And I guess internal commercial awareness is understanding how you fit into that picture and how you kind of contribute towards it.
Okay, that's really great. So there's some things you've mentioned, and it's really, really good because you must both be internally commercial aware, and of course you gave an exercise in finding your fit. Being able to actually know the difference, and of course now for internal commercial awareness, we're talking about client relationships. So you're talking about your suppliers, your career pathways, what's the firm's work culture, the technology, how does technology play a role, in the firm, and being able to actually participate as well. And then, of course, there's also something you also mentioned. I may be giving a lot of tips away, but I want people to actually read this book because I think it's gold, because when I read it, I was so blown away. So you talk about the SWOT and pestle approach. And I feel like that's so amazing in understanding basically, how to actually, so for example, you're given a question and you actually use the example of Brexit and how it basically affects your firm and how it affects your client. So you're talking about how it affects your clients externally and how it affects your firm, internally. And so you use the SWOT approach, which is basically your strength. So I wanted to explain what exactly. So if I say, okay, this is SWOT approach, I'm like, okay, what is that? So can you please just really, really explain to us briefly on what it is, how to use that, especially in targeting or building your commercial awareness?
Yeah, so I wish I came up with this, but I didn't. But it's a really kind of useful tool you can use. It's not perfect, but it's certainly really useful sort of starting point. So SWOT is sort of SWOT. It's an acronym, stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And this is a really good way to basically analyze and understand a client before they embark on whatever kind of legal problem they're going to do. So if a client comes and says, look, what's our kind of current position? How are we doing in relation to our competitors? Where are we fitting in with our market? So you look at their strengths. What are they currently doing really well? Take Facebook as an example. I think I use in the book. They've got an incredible brand. They're used by billions of people over the world. It's they've got a huge platform. They've got the opportunity to target ads in a really kind of unique way that not many other businesses can. That's clearly a huge strength for them. A weakness, I guess, would be they've had a lot of kind of debates and kind of scandals recently when it comes to data privacy. People are becoming less trusted on the platform. The idea of fake news being spread on there. People are concerned about how their information is being processed and so on. So that's kind of an idea of the kind of strengths and weaknesses side of things. And then I guess the opportunities is kind of how you turn those strengths into greater strengths. So, what's an opportunity that Facebook could use recently? Well, obviously everyone's at home. Everyone's kind of really reliant on video calling. I think they've already begun to do this, but how can they kind of make video conferencing, more of a platform so they can host webinars and events like these? And I guess a threat would be, something like Zoom taking away a significant portion of their space, or, something along the lines of more kind of data protection legislation that would force them to change their business model in some way. So that's a really kind of quick example of how you can go through the different strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of a company kind of as it stands before you embark on something. And then I guess when it comes to the second part of that, which is PESTLE, which is sort of an acronym for PESTLE, so the political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors. So, now that we've understood where this company is and where it's sitting in the market and how it relates to its competitors, PESTLE is a good way to understand, okay, if we're going to try to solve this problem, what are the different kind of elements of this problem that we need to be aware of? So, it could be that some are more important than others, but if we're thinking about political factors, how are other countries reacting to certain things that are going on in the world at the moment? Is there any kind of big political shift that is kind of underway? Brexit was a good example of that, of how political opinion kind of forced through this legislation. Those are kind of examples of how you would break down a problem into its different areas, and then by doing that SWOT and PESTLE together, you've hopefully got a good idea as to who your client is, what you need to look out for when you try and solve their problem, and even some ideas as to how you do it.
That's really great. So you're talking about the political, the economic, of course, the structure, the technical part, the legal part, and the environmental factors as well. So, having all this, having these bullet points basically just give you an idea as to what exactly to give your client when it comes to advice. And I think that's really fantastic, because it actually shows that you've done your research, you've done the needful, you've done your due diligence, and, of course, you know how to actually do the needful. So that's really great. Thank you very much. So from Comaprit, I hope I pronounced your name. So sorry if I made any mistake with that. He's asked, what do you think virtual work experience programs at Insight Sherpa can impact assessments when I apply for vacation schemes or training contracts? So I think we briefly stated that, but if you have anything to add. So he's basically asking, how do virtual internships basically increase your chances of actually landing vacation schemes or training contracts?
Yeah, so like I said, I think they're really good for kind of helping you learn more about a firm and helping you kind of make your decision making. You have to kind of realize that the kind of virtual internships, anyone can do them. So in terms of their kind of, I guess, face value as to what a firm will think when they see them on paper, it will depend on firm to firm. But what you will get in terms of your own value is the ability to practice these tasks and these experiences and kind of have a go at reading through these documents, and you will hopefully learn something more about law and more about what type of things you're interested in. So like I said, I think it's that really kind of good initial point to kind of build your knowledge and information and understanding about law. And then once you've done them, go out and try to speak to other lawyers, try to secure some kind of legal work experience yourself, or just try to kind of understand what type of law firm you want to work for. So hopefully all of those factors will kind of help, because when you get to writing your application and you go for that kind of funneling idea like we talked about earlier, and kind of taking the recruiter through your story, you could use a virtual experience as a good example of that. I first found out about the firm when I tried your virtual experience. I kind of really enjoyed these elements of the work, and it just kind of inspired me to learn more, and then go on to detail what else you've done in your journey. So hopefully they can kind of help with the kind of information provision side of things.
All right, thank you, Harry, for that question. I hope that question was answered. Okay, so on to the next one. So this question may actually resonate with you. So Johnny asks again, hi, Harry, for those who do create content, how do you facilitate discussions in the comments rather than surface level engagement? I noticed many of your posts have opened ways for deep engagement. How can content creators try to replicate that kind of level of engagement?
That's a good question. So I think it will depend slightly on how you've built. I mean, presumably if you have some kind of following or some kind of community that you engage with, it kind of depends on how you've built it to date. So I guess the kind of primary thing that I started out with when I started writing publicly, when I started my blog and when I started this podcast, was the idea of what would I have really wanted 2 years ago as a resource to help, to stop me making those same mistakes, to stop kind of, stop getting myself confused with misconceptions, all those kind of things. I think if you kind of ask yourself that question, you'll end up creating something that's really valuable, and people will appreciate things which are really valuable. So I think if you can kind of focus your content on the idea of value and helping people, what I've tend to find is the more you do that over time, the more people will kind of keep following what you're doing, and hopefully kind of stay that kind of deeper engagement, like you say. I also think it comes down to posting things which are not just valuable, but are either slightly interesting or even potentially, controversial. I mean, obviously don't say anything crazy, but if you kind of give a really unique insight into something, or you kind of tell a bit about your journey, or you kind of pose a question to people and kind of want to kind of talk about an area which either splits opinion or just is open for discussion, I think people will kind of naturally gravitate towards that anyway. And then finally, I guess, especially on LinkedIn, all of that is boosted by the fact that you're already going out and kind of interacting with other people's content. So platforms like LinkedIn especially reward people who use their platform and engage with other people's content and like it and comment it and share it and add their thoughts. So from the algorithm's perspective, in terms of how your content shows up, that's really important. But then also just the idea of human connection and actually kind of engaging with other people's ideas and interacting with them is really important too. So hopefully that's a way to hopefully drive a bit more engagement beyond just kind of surface level stuff, like you say.
Yes, of course. I've particularly been able to see that. So information that's current, information that a lot of people are interested in at the time, information that that will never run out of style. Those are some of the things you can begin to put. And LinkedIn is built in such a way that you don't have to just dump content. You can always build a trail of engagement. So that's why different social media platforms have different uses, different algorithms. One of the things I understand about LinkedIn is that when you post, the more people engage, the more the visibility increases. So once you're able to capture one person's attention, it's kind of like, a domino effect. A lot of people now begin to see, a lot of people begin to engage, and before you know, you are having almost 10,000 views, and of course, a lot of comments. And for everyone who likes a comment, for everyone who makes a comment, other people in their own network get to see what they're doing. So, it just goes on and on like that. And that's how, visibility practically grows. So that's really, really great. And thank you for that. So that leads me to my next question. And we're almost rounding up. So please, guys, if you have more questions, please just put it down. I wouldn't want to take all of Harry's time. I could keep it here till tomorrow, but he has things to do. So, okay. So you have a blog. You have an Instagram channel handle. You tweet. You're also on Twitter, and you've been able to. So how have you been able to successfully use all these platforms? Because some people may say, I'm really not so good on LinkedIn, but I'm a vibe on Instagram. I know how to connect with people on Instagram. Saying I'm not really into pictures and words. I just love to tweet. I just love to. I have sudden sparks of inspiration. So basically, how can you leverage each of these social media platforms to boost your visibility? Job one, and also maybe attract global attention or achieve global relevance. All of these things you've been able to do.
Yeah, so you said something that was really important in your answer, which is, I know how to do Instagram, for example. I like pictures and I like how it works. You don't necessarily need to be on every single social media platform. If there's one that you really enjoy and that really works for you, it probably is, it works to kind of go all in on that and to really maximize that one. That's what I did with LinkedIn at first. I didn't get on Twitter or Instagram until a little while later. And it still is today my kind of main platform. But if you're looking to explore others, if you're looking to, go beyond what you're perhaps used to, I think just trying to, again, go back to what you said, Rosamund, understanding how each of these platforms are different. So, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram all have different algorithms. They all have different ways that they demonstrate their content. There's different ways that the average user probably likes to consume that content and understand it. So, you think about Instagram, it's obviously very visual. So, the kind of how it looks is arguably more important than what it is, versus a lot of other platforms. Take an idea like Twitter, it's very conversational, it's very discussion focused, everything's happening in real time. So that's almost like a never ending kind of stream of discussion that you can kind of get involved with. And then something like LinkedIn is probably just a kind of more kind of, I guess, I don't know, formal or kind of a bit slower than something like Twitter, because people tend to post, if they do post a lot, once a day or once every few days. And like you said, the idea that you can, someone can like your piece of content and it gets shared with all of their network as well is something that's quite unique with LinkedIn. So I think when you're just getting started, focus on that one platform that you really like and that you either use in a personal capacity already. Think about how you could use it in a business or professional one. And then once you've kind of got to grips with one, consider others that interest you and hopefully, put it into practice and see where it goes.
All right, that's amazing. Thank you for that answer. And I believe that whatever platform you're drawn to, you can leverage it, all right, and you can gain visibility when you're giving value. That's amazing. So I have one last question from Emmanuel AG. Okay, he's a close friend of mine. So he says, "Good morning, sir. It's great having you here. Please, I want to know whether these internship opportunities are also available for lawyers with interest in human rights and pro bono services. What are the chances for accessing some of this via the virtual platforms? And if there are any opportunities?" Emmanuel Ejim from Nigeria.
So I think, especially with Inside Sherpa at the moment, which is kind of the main virtual internship opportunity sort of platform, it tends to be quite commercially focused, because if you think about their business model, the way it works is, Inside Sherpa will go to a firm who has lots of money and say, "We will build this platform for you and help kind of draw people to learn more about your firm." And they do that in exchange for a fee. And generally, pro bono services, human rights and criminal law and so on don't tend to have as much of a budget. Having said that, I recently created a sort of spreadsheet which details all sorts of different free courses that people can take to learn a little bit more about law. I'm going to share it in the chat just now. I hope that works. But basically, the idea behind that is that you can hopefully go through that spreadsheet. I know there's not loads about kind of litigation or human rights and so on. I'm doing my best to think it. But what it hopefully does give you is a little bit more about how lawyers think, how to improve your kind of critical thinking, how to improve your commercial awareness, like we mentioned, business development and so on. They're not, those are kind of universal tools that you'll need as a lawyer, regardless of whatever area of practice you go into. And then I think if you're looking to virtually learn more about human rights or something, it might not be that there's a formal virtual internship, but there certainly will be webinars, there certainly will be podcasts, there certainly will be videos and discussion you can get involved with to learn about them. That'd certainly make a sort of good alternative for you to learn more about that side of law.
All right, that's amazing. Thank you very much. So thank you. I would love to get that platform for you.
Yes, no, I just put it in the chat, so hopefully everyone can access that.
Awesome. I can't have access to it because actually I'm but that's great. I'm going to click mine immediately. All right. So thank you so much for sharing that. So the truth is, okay, so let's break it down a bit. So some of the things that you've spoken about: honing your story, commercial awareness, understanding the business of law, understanding the business of your clients, basically, being self-aware, knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses. So what exactly should you basically, what should be your mindset when trying to break into, global practice? And the truth is that technology has made law firms, become one, has made people become one, has brought people together as an individual. And for somebody who is, basically trying to navigate this almost seeming new path, and you're just like, I want to make a difference globally. I want to impact. I want to do something that's going to make a difference. What kind of qualities should I possess as an individual? Just coming from your experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest lesson I learned going through the process, I mean, there's no hiding it. Law is very competitive. It's a very hard profession to break into on your first go. When you first receive rejections, when you first kind of trying to learn more about law, and you might not be succeeding as quickly as you like, it's very easy to compare yourself to other people and where they're at now. And I think there's a Canadian professor, Jordan Peterson, who kind of had a great quote, which I do my best to sort of live by ever since I read it, which is compare yourself to where you were yesterday rather than where someone else is today. And I think if you focus on that idea of kind of compound interest, of trying to just improve on a small habit or a small area, even if it's just for 15 minutes a day, that will add up over time. And I think that's a kind of really important way to hopefully try to do that. And also, if you compare yourself to other people, let's face it, there's always going to be someone who's better than you at something. There's always going to be someone who can play the violin better than you, can play the piano better than you. And even if you are arguably one of the greatest in the world, like Michael Jordan, for example, basketball, people are always still going to not have 100% consensus that it's you, and always kind of have that debate. So focus on kind of your own journey and your role and how you're going to improve. And then just very quickly, the second thing is, I guess, just evaluate how you use your time on a day-to-day basis. It was very easy when I was at university for me to waste somewhere between 4 to 6 hours of every day just, watching rubbish TV or just like not doing anything productive. And if you add that time up over a period of time, say 5 hours a day times by 7 days a week, that's 35 hours every week. If you times that by 52 weeks a year, and you say that your time is worth, I don't know, $5 an hour, $10 an hour, that's thousands and thousands and thousands of kind of useful hours and potential money that you're kind of just pouring down the drain. That's not to say just work 24/7, but certainly try to do things which are useful to you, both in a business and just a normal kind of life sense, I guess. So yeah, those are probably the two things I wish I'd learned a bit quicker, but thankful I've hopefully tried to learn them now.
And you're doing such a fantastic job. We must really, really thank you for a lot of insights that you've shared. I believe a lot of people can actually learn from. Thank you very much. So we're about rounding up. We're almost close to 2 hours, and I think we're just 1 hour gone. But there's so many things that we've actually learned in this short time. I wouldn't want to keep Harry waiting. So I'll just ask one question. I believe someone else has dropped a question. And so someone asked, how can one secure? Okay, I think we've answered this question from Inechinaza. She asked, how can one secure international virtual internships? Also, how can this help in boosting the career path of a prospective lawyer? So I believe you've already answered that question. I think a lot of us already know Inside Sherpa, so you can just go to the website. I don't know, Harry, if you could help us with the link to Inside Sherpa so that you can also
I'll put that in the chat now so everyone can find it.
Okay, that's awesome. So let me just go to I think the last question I have before we would have to move on. So basically, what exactly, having interned in some of the top law firms in the world, seeing how these firms are structured, what exactly are the international best practices that should be adopted by these law firms, that should be adopted by law student trainees, future lawyers, and even currently legal practitioners in terms of organization structure and being able to actually enhance and boost productivity? Your general advice.
So how should students kind of improve for international firms, did you say?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So and how law firms can engage. What are some of the international best practices that law firms actually should engage? Maybe in my own country or whatever country people actually. So what are some of the things that should be done for lawyers, law firm owners, and law students?
Yeah, so I think from the student side of things, if you're interested in that international element of law, I think like we said earlier, try to get that global appreciation of how law works, think about how businesses function across borders, try to understand how different jurisdictions are different or how different parts of the world are, specialists in certain areas. So if you think about London, for example, that's kind of considered one of the key kind of financial and service provision places in the world. If you go to California, San Francisco, it's obviously considered a really big tech area. Same with kind of Hong Kong, Japan, and so on. So try to understand a little bit more about how all these kind of businesses and countries and jurisdictions work together and get that global appreciation. And I guess from the firm side of things, I think the reason they kind of look for this kind of international element is because, like we said, so many clients nowadays are multi-jurisdictional, or a legal problem won't just be in one country. It could be that a supplier in one country, say America, has a supplier from China and there's some kind of issue. You've got two parties there in different jurisdictions, and there might be all kinds of different legal questions as to how that contract was drawn up that is going to be really kind of important. So yeah, I think that's kind of that. And then I guess another kind of thing which is slightly related to this question is I get a lot of questions from international students basically saying, am I at a disadvantage applying from an international background or anything like that? And I think, like we said, going back to the idea of kind of telling your own story and trying to sell to the recruiter why you're there, I think it's really important to try to think of your own international experience as kind of a unique selling point. So, are you bilingual? That's a huge thing to have on your CV, because a lot of lawyers law firms would really treasure something like that if their clients are kind of based in different areas. Have you worked with a huge diverse array of people? Can you kind of espouse the idea of diversity and inclusion and kind of help build that collaborative culture? Do you have this global context of how different jurisdictions work? I think those are all kind of examples of potentially, kind of examples of you can put on a CV that are good selling points for your application. And I guess if you're looking to learn a little bit more about kind of the kind of qualification process and things, there's a really good platform called Global Lawyers Connect. I'll put it in the chat. You can find them on Facebook. You can find them on LinkedIn and Instagram. I'm part of that, and they do a really good job of kind of breaking down all these different elements of what it means to kind of go from one country to another when it comes to trying to qualify, and hopefully leveraging your application. So hopefully that will help with Habib's question as well, which he's just mentioned. But yeah, no, that's also a really good resource.
All right. Thank you so much. I think knowledge is gold in this new age, and you've been able to share some of these sources. And of course, if you also want to get global opportunities, please also visit harryclarklaw.com, because you will also get a lot of content there. You'll be able to see a lot of things that basically affect each and everyone, and it's actually quite amazing. Because going through the website, I think your content is such that it's easily relatable, cuts across board. So you don't have to say you're just in one jurisdiction. You understand, because you talk about things like knowing how to negotiate. Chidima asks, is there a need to write and pass bar exams from different jurisdictions? I think that is possible. I don't know what your answers are to that. That's a question from Chidima. For you to be able to qualify to practice in these jurisdictions, do you have to write and pass bar exams for those jurisdictions?
So each jurisdiction will be different, but generally, I guess the kind of average answer is yes. Like I said, if you go on that Global Lawyers Connect, they try to break down some of the different resources by country, so you can learn a bit more about the kind of qualification process to practice in different countries. But as a general rule, you'll need to pass some kind of formal exam unless you've already qualified in your home country and you have a certain amount of experience, and that is considered kind of sufficient. But for the most part, generally, yes.
Okay, all right. So I think that also answers the question that Habib Akinpelu asked, because I think he talked about considering multiple bar qualifications. So also have that at the back of your mind. So for the very last question, I will be able to attend to. Jenny says, following up on the issue of internal commercial awareness, are you able to share some insights about what we should be aware of about Baker Makenzie? What are some of the key differences between international firms like Baker Makenzie and domestic firms, or maybe local boutique firms?
Sure. So I actually got that question a lot in the last month or so when people are starting to kind of research the firm, because I think applications are opening soon. And what I did was I spoke to the firm. I got a panel, I think about 4 or 5 of currently practicing trainees who are currently working at the firm, and essentially asked them all the different questions that students often ask. So what makes Bakers different? What is it like to actually be a trainee solicitor on a day-to-day basis? What is it you do enjoy? Have you done secondments? All these kind of questions, and kind of live streamed it. So if you go to my YouTube channel, if you just type in Harry Clark, you can view the whole live stream back. All of the different questions are timestamped, so you can just click on the things that are interesting to you. And I guess the reason I'd kind of forward you to that is because I'm yet to start working there, but these guys have been working there for a while, and they've all got different answers and different experiences as to why they applied and why they like it. And so hopefully that will kind of really help you distinguish it between other firms, like you say. So yeah, if you head over to my YouTube channel, you can watch it back there and hopefully answer some of your questions as well.
All right, that's amazing. We just have a comment before I would have to round off here. So this is from Rachel Purvis. Thank you so much for this comment. She said, I attended the webinar last night hosted by the Law Student Association of Nigeria. We heard from that your personality is your business card, with which has resonated really with me, and I see just illustrated in yourself, Rosamond and Harry. So thank you very much for that comment. That's really, really appreciated. Okay, thank you very much. So any last final words before we go? I think this just in 1 hour we've gotten so much knowledge. So I don't know if you have any formal comments, but I am out of questions. But what I have to do now is to put this knowledge to work. I always say knowledge acquired that is not being dispensed and used is just knowledge. You can't translate it to anything. So I would definitely share the links, share the ebook after this webinar. But I don't know if, Harry, you have anything to say before we actually sign off now.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I hope it's been useful. If anyone has any questions, if you're wanting to learn more about what I do, like I said, go to my website. You can sign up to my newsletter, or you can find me on most social media at Harry Clark or Harry Clark Law. And if you're looking to learn a little bit more about law practice generally, feel free to listen to the podcast. It's called More from Law. You can find it on Spotify, iTunes, and also you can listen on my website if you don't have either of those as well. So hopefully those are all good examples of resources to try out. And finally, I guess just don't just take my word for it. I've had one perspective, I've had one way of doing things, I've had one journey and one background, but you could ask a different lawyer from a different country or whatever, and they'll have a completely different set of advice and kind of evidence to give. So really try your best to go out there and speak to people and learn as much as you can, because there's only so much I know, and it's certainly nothing in comparison to what a lot of other lawyers will know. So hopefully that will help you guys in the sort of beginning stages of learning a bit more about law.
Okay, I'm so excited about your future, Harry, because I know that the sky is just the starting point. I can't wait to see you grow and excel. When you start September, I will definitely be keeping in touch, and I know that it's going to be a beautiful working experience from now henceforth. So thank you very much. Thank you for your comments. I see everyone's comments. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful. So just a tiny introduction of myself. My name is Rosemont, host of the Younger Mentorship Series. This series basically is to encourage young lawyers who are basically looking for clarity, looking for direction, and meeting up with as many persons who are global thought leaders like Harry. We've had a lot of people come up. We've had Mordecai Adejo, we had Frank Ramos come on. And it's really, really been an exciting experience. I can't wait to see you guys again. Thank you so much for your comments, and that will be bye for now. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you.
We'll definitely send all the materials that are needed to as many persons who basically registered, and I would really, really love to connect with you even after now. So that would be a goodbye from me on my end, and thank you very much. Goodbye, everybody. Have a very, very good time.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.
All right, bye.